This morning we're going to continue with our series on real life, and we've done various topics, and we've reached today the topic about parenting. So what does the Bible really teach about parenting? Now, if you're not a parent, and I know many of you aren't, please don't switch off, because really this is about relationships. And the sort of what we're going to be talking about really, I think, applies to everybody, not just those of us who have children. I'd have to just say as well that it's a really difficult topic. Christine and I have been anguishing for months about what to say, because I don't think there's a formula. I don't think there's a perfect kind of set of rules and principles, tools and techniques that will work for, universally for everybody. And I know myself, we have 3 children. Come with the next slide. We have 3 children, Matthew, Daniel and Katie. And what works for Matthew doesn't work for Daniel, definitely doesn't. And what works for Daniel doesn't work for Katie. And I think every human relationship is subtly different. So it's a difficult topic. When you think about difficult topics and all the aspects of learning about those topics, there's a big difference between knowledge and skill, isn't there? And if you were a pilot, okay, you might sit in front of a brilliant pilot. You're sat in front of me and I'm telling you what I've learned about parenting my kids. But actually, that's just knowledge. And actually, for a pilot, he's got to get in a simulator. He's got to learn the skills and know all the different things. And then there's surprises that come along that you've never seen before. They're not even in the simulator. And I think really, actually, to really learn or change the way you parent, you really got to be coached, haven't you? You've got to somehow have a simulator type thing. So me just talking about it, Christine just talking about it, that's why we found it really difficult. But if you don't remember a single thing this morning, apart from one thing, what I want you to think about is have fun with those you relate to. Have fun with your children. Okay? I'm going to do something funny now. Okay? I'm going to be talking a sermon, and it's going to be brilliant. So that's a bit of childish behavior. And really, I think that it's really important that you can have fun with your kids, that you can play with your kids. And that's great. It's obvious when they're little, isn't it? But actually, you need to be able to play when they're that age. And you need to be able to play when they're 40. And actually, when I go home, my mum's a nutcase. But we have some great fun. She's not a nutcase, but we just have some great fun together, even though she's 83. We just rib her mercilessly. My dad, we're talking about stupid, daft things he said and did 40 years ago. We're still ribbing him for them. But that's part of the heart-to-heart connection that we have in our relationship together. I'll just tell you a little story, okay? These 3. A few months ago, I was in the garden. It was a hot summer's evening. I could hear there was a kerfuffle going on in one of the bedrooms. All 3 of them were in there mucking about doing something stupid. And I thought, actually, I'm going to add to this. So I was in the back garden. There would be a big patio below the bedroom window, and the window was open. And I picked up this great big piece of industrial pipe insulation, like 4 inches diameter, about 6 foot long. And I thought, what I'll do, I'll throw it through the window. And that will really add some fun into what's going on up there. Whatever was going on up there. I didn't know what was going on up there. So I got this bit of pipe insulation, threw it, launched it at the window. Little did I know that actually Katie was filming this thing on, social media. I don't really know it, but WhatsApp and all that. She was filming something stupid that was going on. So they were filming this stupid thing. Matthew and Daniel was there. And then suddenly this bit of pipe insulation goes, and there's so Matthew says, "What the heck is that?" And Katie's eyes almost like bulge and pop out with fear. And it's all caught on WhatsApp. And it's actually, that's part of our family legend now, because it's such a funny thing. So if you do nothing else, have fun with your kids, play with your kids. And if you haven't got kids, have fun with your friends, play with your friends. Childlike behavior, it's brilliant. And why am I saying that? I'm saying that because that builds a heart-to-heart connection between you and the other person. You know, if you need to play together, you need to have fun, whatever that is, that heart-to-heart connection is critical. I'm going to just outline really what God says about our relationship with him, and that's the model for our relationship with our children, with our kids, our relationships in general, in church, with our friends, even with people we work with. That's God's plan. That's God's way. And then, so I'm going to outline what the Bible says, and Christine's going to talk much more about practically what for us. What were the hows? What's worked for us? What we believe is vital, isn't it? Because our behavior flows from our beliefs. When a long time ago, I did a master's degree in, it was to do with manufacturing, but the thesis in that degree was about change. How do you get change? It was about change management. And the sort of premise of that is that there's things that people say that they espouse, and there's things that they actually do, which is their behavior. And it's actually their behavior, it's the things that they do that highlight really what they believe, the deep beliefs, probably the tacit beliefs that they don't even know they think are their beliefs. And it's actually that drives our behavior. And that's why, so it's really important that in the very first step, when we're looking at relationships, the relationships we have with our kids, that we think about, well, actually, deep down, what do we really believe about that? And if we were to just give you hints and tips about being a mum or a dad, or hints and tips about relationships, if that was based on a flawed set of beliefs, then basically it might mean that you're just able to manipulate your kids better. Do you see what I mean? So it's actually the belief is the fundamental thing, the most important thing. And, there's often an assumption that being brought up in a Christian family is a good thing, and that's not necessarily so. Some of my friends that I grew up with, I know they were Christian, they were in Christian families, but they were growing up in a fear factory, literally, honestly. And I think actually that's actually not God's way. It's vitally important we know what we believe, and that belief turns into, basically it's exhibited by our behavior and our actions, the way we interact with our kids and in our relationships. So what does the Bible say? It's about a heart-to-heart connection. What does the Bible say about God's heart? And how does God relate with his children, his sons, his daughters, you and me? And then that gives us a model for what we believe and how that works out in terms of loving and nurturing our own children. Quickly then, the Bible, it's an account of relationships. We have a relational three-person God the Father, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. And God created relational human beings in his own image. It says in Genesis, we haven't got time to look at this, but it says in Genesis that God walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. He walked with them. There was a heart connection there. There was a friendship there. There was freedom for them, and there was choices that they were able to make for themselves. There were these trees that, God said, actually, it's your choice. So there was a heart connection, but they weren't robots. They actually had self-determination. And as we know, that relationship with God was damaged through their poor choices, through sin. But God had and has a long-term plan to restore our relationships with him. And God's restoration plan is basically revealed through two different covenants. And we're just going to read what it says in the Bible about these covenants. This is in Jeremiah 31, verse 31 to 34. It says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them. I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. So God's restoration plan revealed through two different covenants in that piece of scripture, isn't it? There's an old covenant where the motivating force in the relationship with God came in the form of blessings for obedience and threats of punishment for disobedience. You know, there was plagues, there was exiles, there were attacks. A couple of weeks ago, Bob was talking about Gideon. And you remember the Israelites, they mucked up, they followed false gods, they went their own way, they turned away from God, and trouble befell them, didn't it? I don't know if you remember that. So when the threat of punishment was removed from God's people, then they would lapse into rebellion. And you know, in that model, in that old covenant model, the human authority is all about upholding God's laws and punishing lawbreakers. And it's an easy leap to believe in an angry God who's wielding a big stick against us, isn't it? And you know, many parents, whether they're Christians or not, raise children according to an Old Testament paradigm. It's almost as natural to think mistakes or sin, that's natural to think that sin or mistakes must be punished. And this parenting model, it's basically from the outside in, isn't it? I'm going to make you behave like this. You're going to do this. And it's an Old Testament model, and it doesn't matter, Christians or not, you may not have any inkling to a faith in God, but lots of people out there parent like that. Just a little story. A couple of years ago, we were coming back. We had a brilliant holiday in Chamonix in France, and we're in the queue for the ferry at Dunkirk. This big white Merc draws up. Young man, young woman get out, two children in the back. And we just sat there. It was delayed, of course. You know, we were waiting for ages. And we're just watching this family interaction. And the child spills something in the back of this Merc. And honestly, this father, talk about punishing, it was horrific to watch. It was absolutely horrific. This poor child, he didn't do it on purpose. It's just kids do this sort of stuff, don't they? But this guy, I drew the conclusion, and I'm sure probably the child over time would drew the conclusion, that Dad loves his Merc more than he loves me. You know, and I don't think that's a good model. And I don't believe that that's God's model either. In the new covenant relationship between God and his sons and daughters, it's based on faith in Jesus and his atonement. You know, it's about grace, it's about forgiveness, it's about a heart connection, isn't it? And love is the primary motivation to stay in that relationship. Haven't all the worship that's what we've been singing about, isn't it? The fact that, you know, there's a banqueting table. God says, come on, there's a heart connection between me and you. It doesn't matter if you've mucked up. It doesn't matter if you've tipped up an ice cream in the back of the Merc. Actually, there's a heart connection between me and God. I love my heart connection between me and God. And we need that heart connection between me and Matthew. We need that heart connection between me and Daniel. We need that heart connection between me and Katie. You need that heart connection between you and your friends, and that needs to be worked at. And that's God's way. That's the God that we have. So God relates to us in a new way. If you look in verse 33 in that Jeremiah thing, he says, I will put my law within them and I will write it on their hearts. You know, when God dwells in us, we no longer need to be controlled from the outside because he gives us a capability and responsibility to control ourselves. That's what this passage is talking about in the new covenant. And then the final verse in Jeremiah, it sort of starts to tell us why this switch in covenants could take place. In verse 34, it says, I will forgive their iniquity and I will remember their sin no more. You know, as long as sin had not been punished and our hearts remained spiritually dead, we're separated from God. But on the cross, Jesus dealt with that condition that required God to relate to us from the outside. And as a result, punishment, wrath, intimidation, they've disappeared. God is a safe place. And dad and mum should be a safe place. But actually, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying so then anarchy can reign. It's not like that. But basically, what it says is that because sin has been dealt with in the new covenant, we don't need to be punished or controlled, but we need to learn to manage our freedom responsibly. Okay, and that changes the goal of parenting, doesn't it? The motivating force has to be love and freedom, not punishment and fear. And the human authority, the parent's authority, has to be about protecting and nurturing the identity that God's given a child, the calling that God's given a child, the connection, and fostering and nurturing the connections between God's family members. And isn't that what church is about? Whether you're a parent or not, it's friendship. It's about developing a heart-to-heart connection with each other. And where do we look for? You need a master, don't you? You need to look to the person who does it best. And obviously, our master is Jesus. The ultimate model is the relational values and practices that you see in Jesus himself. And just look, I'm not going to go into them now, but look in the Bible, look at the characters that you see Jesus interacting with. The woman at the well, Zacchaeus, children who came to him. Don't let them children come near Jesus. No, let them come. Hey, come down. There's a heart-to-heart connection between me and you, and many, many others. That's our model. So there's a heart connection established and nurtured between Jesus and these people in the Bible. There's choices that are allowed, and there's freedom to impart. Just kind of lastly, the Holy Spirit, in John 14:16, it says, when Jesus goes to be with the Father, and he's sort of saying, he's comforting the disciples because he's going to be leaving them. But he says, the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit's going to come. And he doesn't say, there's going to be another controller is going to come and control you. It actually says, no, there's another comforter. That's God's way. There's a heart-to-heart connection between you and God. There's a heart connection between me and God. The Holy Spirit is a comforter. He's going to guide us through life. God designed and intended our families to express the kind of relationship that he designed us to have with himself. And that's characterized by a heart-to-heart connection. It's characterized by choices. God always gives choices. Think back to the Garden of Eden. They weren't robots. They had some choices to make. And there was a freedom in that. But there's actually a better freedom in knowing Jesus and letting him guide from the inside out, not the outside in. That's just a real quick tour of the Bible message. And it's a deep message. I could have gone to Proverbs and gone to hints and tips, couldn't I? In Proverbs, train up a child the way he must go, all that kind of thing. But actually, I think the message of the Bible is a relational one, and it's about a heart-to-heart connection between me and God. And the message really for the Christian parent is, hey, that relationship you have with God, that's the kind of relationship you need to be working on with your kids. Okay, Christine, come on.
Okay, so part B. Firstly, of course, I have no qualifications on this subject whatsoever, except that I'm a mum. So I just come before you with that. I'm not an expert at all, and in fact, I just want to say that there are many of you in this room who have cared for, supported our family, our children. You have nurtured them for many, many years, and I just want to say how thankful and grateful we are actually to you, church, today. Okay, we'll start with that. So in the next few minutes, we're going to take a look at a few practicalities of parenting, building on the principles that Steve's already brought. I'm going to be quite fast because actually there's an awful lot to say on this subject when it boils down to it. And I'm not going to say a lot of things either, because parenting is actually very complex. What if you have a disabled child? What if you're foster? to smack or not to smack? When you start thinking about it, we could talk all day, all week on parenting. So actually we're just going to limit it down this morning just to a few hints and tips, practical things on parenting and our faith and our daily walk. So we want our children to be well-adjusted, happy, secure, to have a self-worth, mature, respectful. We want to allow them to be the children that God has created them to be. And when I brainstormed this list and Steve had a look at it, we were like, ooh, that's quite a tall order, isn't it? But parenting is hard work, and we're in it for the long haul. But we have a Father God and a church family who are doing this with us. You're never on your own. So, so here's my first slide here. Children are born with a character, they have a nature, and we are called as parents to nurture them so that they go on and make their choices. So that's what we're going to just consider this morning. We can start with Proverbs, please, Lorraine. Basically, when our child is born, we're called to train it in the way, we long for them to be trained to reach the end point. And then with the next verse, I'm not going to read them just because time is short. When we reach the end of our journey and we look back, we want to rejoice in the family life that we've had and be joyful in that and to give thanks to God for that. So basically, I'm just going to present very quickly now some values, some hints and tips that we found over the years. And the first one is quality time. That's great, thanks. So our youngest started university recently, and she sent us a message saying, "Uni has made me realise that I have an amazing family and have had an amazing childhood." Obviously, we were quite touched by this, but I was interested to hear from her, why was she saying that? Who had she interacted with to actually make her reach that conclusion? And she's told me about several very difficult family situations that she's learnt about now with her new friends. But one struck me specifically, a new young man friend that he'd been sent to boarding school, and he had expressed that he has no relationship with his father at all because his father is always at work. So that father is trying to provide for his family, always working, but actually there's no relationship there. And, we think that there's parenting books out there, there's studies out there, there's gurus talking about this stuff all the time, but actually people don't hear the message of that. Spending time with our children and giving them our full attention is so important, and it begins at babyhood when we talk with them, we play with them, we cuddle them, we read books to them, as little babies. And at this stage, obviously, physical touch is so important. They always want to be on your lap, they're always holding your hand. Just enjoy it, make the most of it, because when they're older, they're absolutely chuffed to bits when they want to give you a hug. It's a blessing still when they want to cuddle you and hug you at the age, for example, our 3 are now. So take every opportunity to spend time together, and I'm not going to go into that, of what that could be. Sarah said a few this morning, what they do as a family. Prioritise some time every day, every weekend, to do something together with your children. Make sure that you have a family holiday away from home and work commitments. It's so important to have that time. For Steve, when our kids were little, he would go to work and come home late at the end of the day. The way he chose to give that attention to our children was reading their bedtime story. And if you talk to our children, they will speak of this still as a highlight for them. They worked through the Narnia books, The Hobbit, the whole caboodle. And in fact, I brought this morning, this is Katie's all-time favourite book, The Wind in the Willows. And she must have read this book, or had this book read to her a dozen times or more. And even once she could read, she was still having it read to her. But when I look at it, actually, I've hardly read any of it. Steve has done it all, because that was his time that he was free and able to spend with his children. So it wasn't necessarily about the books that they were reading, it was that relationship, that closeness of spending time together, and your dad actually wanting to do that with you. It's easy to stick your child in front of a television screen, or these days tablets and all these fancy devices. In fact, we had a meal out recently, and the family next to us had 2 young boys. They spent the whole of the meal on their device, even while they were eating. They did not converse with their parents once, and their parents didn't converse with them once. It was so, so sad. I've been asked a few times how much television we let our children watch. I very early on realised that we couldn't have the television on before school. It was a big distraction, and we could never ever be ready to walk out that door on time. So we didn't have it on a weekday morning before school. And in fact, we let them watch about an hour of TV a day. I would say it was about that. But of course that changes as they get older. But they never had a TV in their room. And the computer was always downstairs, where we could see what they were on and what they were doing. Having a short or an appropriate amount of time for TV or a device is good for children, because it means that they have to learn to entertain themselves. They have to learn to get creative, to find an idea, so that they're not bored. And sometimes this requires input from you, but it is time well spent. We had a story tape when they were little called Stig of the Dump. I don't know whether you know that story, and it was read by Tony Robinson. And one day I found all 3 of my children underneath the dining room table as cavemen. And it was quite delightful. They were totally engrossed in being cavemen underneath the table. And it reached the point as time rolled on that actually they got hungry. It was dinner time. Oh, can we have our dinner here? Well, yes, you can, I suppose. So they had little sausages, pot pie, carrot sticks, French bread, whatever I had in the fridge, just sort of safe food, I suppose you'd say, underneath the table. And they called it a Stig tea. We have Stig tea to this day in our family. Whenever we have pot pie, salad, anything like that, it is a Stig tea. It is stuck. Make some wise decisions about who works and when, and these may need to adapt as your children grow and their needs change. Once all my children were at senior school and quite capable of walking home on their own, I still made sure that I was at home a couple of days, 1 or 2, if I could, in the week, to be at home when they came home from school. Not because I wanted to check up on their homework or anything like that, but I just wanted to be there to hear about their day. I felt that it was important to show them that their lives and what they were doing was so important to me. So I made an effort always to be there. Make it a habit to go to church regularly. Make it a natural part of family life. That is what you do. There are exceptions to this. There might be a party, or when they're older they might have an exam, but make it a habit. So, days out, family activities aside, quality time for our family is around the kitchen table. When we eat a meal together of an evening, this is where everybody downloads their day. This is where the debates happen. This is where we provide encouragement and care. Make sure that you have that meal together. I never did a meal for my children and then a meal for us later on. We've always eaten together, and we've made that a priority. This is where we can pray together, We walk and we talk our faith. We can share our difficulties, but we can laugh and joke as well. And in fact, when Matthew left home, it was his space at the table that really hit me the most. It was just not having him at that meal table. So, quality time. Next one, listening. If you value time spent with your children, then as they get older and life gets tough, they will feel that they're able to talk to you. Listening parents are important for emotional health. It gives them a security and a self-esteem because it shows them that you are interested in what they are saying. I often hear parents say, well, as long as they're happy, that's all that matters. I would love my children to always be happy, but they're often not because of friendship problems, homework, being unable to do something, not doing something as well as they really wanted to do it. And it all needs to be expressed and it all needs to be listened to. Be available for that. It might not be a convenient time, but it's so important to try and stop and make time to listen to them. They might have something really important to say. We need to respond to them with words of affirmation, encouragement and understanding, and we need to pray for wisdom into that in our response to our youngsters. Let's just think about our teenagers for a minute. It's a very different world from the one that we grew up in. There's the World Wide Web, gaming, social media pressures, alcohol, ready availability, even in Cockermouth, of recreational drugs. This is a session in itself, but the one thing I want to mention, just to home on one thing, is the increased pressure that they're under, particularly if our children are conscientious. To give you an example of that, the children are set targets, aren't they, from primary age right through now to the senior school, targets, homework, all the time. And there's 3 years between Daniel and Katie. When Daniel was in school, homework would be set in a homework diary, which was sent home, and they carried in their bags. By the time Katie was doing this, it's all done by email. Okay, so Katie was faced with leaving school on a Friday night, knowing what she had to do for her work for the weekend, and then being set more work by email on Saturday morning, throughout the day, Sunday. It was coming at them all the time. School holidays, they're going on holiday and the teachers are going on holiday, but hey-ho, they're set homework throughout the holiday and it's coming at them all the time. They're under so much pressure. Then, of course, they need to show that they're rounded people to future employers and universities. So there's an expectation on top of all this to be doing lots of other things as well. So what do we do as parents? We understand that teachers are also under pressure. There's so much pressure everywhere, isn't there, today? So as parents, we need to listen. We need to support. We need to allow our children time to do their schoolwork and not put other pressures on them. Release them to do that and make sure that they find time to relax as well. Do something that takes them out of it. Encourage them to take a break so it just doesn't become all-consuming. Honesty. Oh, that's on my listening one. Honesty. We should be very careful to be truthful with our children. I'm not saying that we can't have make-believe like Elmer and Father Christmas. I'm not saying that, because that's an essential part of a child's development. But we need to be truthful about the things that affect them. They don't necessarily need every detail, but the truth needs to be delivered in a loving way, because they will pick up that something is going on and it will help them to digest the situation if you actually talk to them about it. Let me give you an example. If you're going to go out later of an evening and you have a babysitter booked, once they've gone to bed, tell them. Don't try and hide it. They'll probably know anyway that you're going out. But when they come downstairs because they want a drink of water, they hadn't realised you were both going out. If your parent or their grandparent is unwell and you know that they don't have long left to live, don't say to your child, "Granny will be fine." Explain to them what is happening, that Granny might not get better because she's very old. And then when Granny actually does die, it's not going to be such a shock to them. You've prepared them for that event. Be truthful about your own emotions. Don't say that you are fine when something's worrying you or you've had a bad day at work. Talk to your children. You actually might be amazed at the response and the help that they give you. But it is important not to overburden your children. Share your vulnerabilities, though, and learn to have an open dialogue with them, and then they will, with you, in due course, hopefully, do the same. We don't always get it right as parents, and we do live with guilt. We're not perfect, but we need to know that we can say sorry to our children and to each other. Although we get it wrong, we know we must learn how to repair our mistakes. Don't let things niggle. Talk about it. Be honest. Modelling. Rob Parsons, the CEO of Care for the Family, who's a great books if you can read those, says values are caught even more effectively than they are taught. Our children watch everything that we do, how we behave, how we respond to situations, how we handle work, how we deal with disappointment, how we organise our time. We need to be so aware of this. I work in a community pharmacy, and a few months ago we had a really elderly patient of ours came in, and she was absolutely ranting and raving at her grandson. Oh boy, you should have heard it. And what she was saying to him was, "How dare you shout and scream at me?" Does she realise what she's modelling? A young woman that I know has 4 young boys, and their father is in prison for abuse of her. The eldest son is needing extra help because he thinks it's okay to hurt her, because that's what's been modelled to him. Now he knows that it's wrong. He knows it's wrong. But he goes into his autopilot when things go wrong, and his autopilot is to scream abuse at his mum. I wonder what our autopilot or our auto-parent is that we drop into when we're under pressure and we're stressed. Just think on that. We must make sure that our actions are consistent with our beliefs, or our children will not find genuine faith. Of course, we can think, well, I'm not going to parent like my parent in certain areas, and we do things deliberately different and in a different way, which is absolutely fine. But what about our parents? The Bible teaches us that we should honour our father and our mother. Steve's mentioned his mum today. Well, Timothy Keller, in his devotional book on the Proverbs, has written something I'm just going to read to you, just to drop this one in as we think about our own parents. Don't despise, curse, or mock your parents, but bless them. This is what your conscience and heart needs and what society needs. Find ways to show them respect at holidays, at gatherings, with phone calls, even social media. Give credit where it is due. I have learnt from you. Let them change if they are trying. Don't stereotype them, and forgive them for things they may have done wrong. This honours the sacrifice that they have made for you, that you know nothing of. And it models for the younger generations how they should treat you when you are older. Just a comment on that, really. It's important in our busy lives to model to our children looking after ourselves. We need time to relax, to keep fit, to have our own interests and hobbies, and sometimes our children catch those interests and do them with us, but often they don't. They've got their own things that they're doing. We should be modelling to our children the value of praying, worshipping, reading our Bibles, caring for others, serving. The list goes on and on. For many, many years, we were leaders at a summer youth camp, and I was the cook. Well, our children weren't old enough to be campers, so we did our own thing during the day while they were all out doing activities, but I would still have the evening meal to make, and they helped me in the kitchen to make those meals, to peel veg or to prepare some of the food. And I know when they go to New Day now that they will help in the kitchen because they've seen that. They've seen what hard work it is and they want to help, and that's a natural place for them to end up helping. And Daniel did a house party recently with his Christian Union and he ended up in the kitchen. Somehow, that's where they know there's always a job to be done. A while ago, I heard Matthew organising a group of youngsters who were heading off into the mountains. His manner, his authority, his checklist were the same that I've heard Steve deliver on so many occasions. Steve is a trained mountain leader, but he did not train or formally teach Matthew. Matthew had caught it, and he was delivering the same. Let our children catch us worshipping Jesus, wanting to be with his people, falling into prayer, talking naturally about our faith and caring for others. Responsibility. How do children learn to be responsible adults and become the young leaders that our churches so desperately need? Katie's biggest brown stamp in her brown stamp book is that she had to start making her packed lunch in year 3, years before the boys were made to make their packed lunch. Because we realised quite early young when they were little that if they were going to learn to be capable adults, they needed to start young. So they had to start making their own sandwiches, they had to clean their own bedroom, and when they were a bit older, they made a family meal. They were actually even given the responsibility of babysitting each other. And on one occasion, the boys were supposed to meet Katie in the town at the library after school, and they forgot her. And they went home. Did this matter? No, it didn't. But I tell you what, they learnt a big lesson that day. It didn't matter. But they still talk about it now because of that realisation of that responsibility. Children can be given responsibility in church. Let them help in the children's work, lead a worship song, say a Bible verse, prepare some food. Let's let them practice in a safe place. This might not work for every family, but we always said to our children that their schoolwork was their responsibility. It was then their choice whether to do it on time, whether to do it well, and to learn what happened if they didn't, but to reap the reward for themselves if praise did come in their direction, because they'd done it on their own. Now, of course, we were always available and willing to help where help was required. And in fact, even yesterday, Steve was giving Katie hints and tips on the latest essay. So it goes on. What matters is that we say to our children that our love is not based on how well they do. We love them, whatever they do. And in fact, we want them to make the choice that they will step into what God is calling them to do. And we don't know what that is. So we have to release them, firm in the knowledge that we will love them, whatever. Should we give them gifts and financial rewards? Well, we don't really have time to go into that one. But I think that children need to do it well for themselves and for their own futures. They don't need to get £100 for getting an A star. Gifts for some children are a love language, but gifts should be an expression of love given freely, not for passing exams. They can be abused. You can have over-gifting in substitute for quality time. Be really careful on that one. Don't be a controlling parent and don't intervene all the time. Your child needs to learn to problem solve. They need to be given freedom and space in their childhood and adolescence to learn for themselves, to develop a sense of self-worth and their own abilities. Discipline. It's important to lay the ground rules with your children when they are young, and I would say actually under 5 years old. then they know that you are the boss and what you say goes, as long as you are being fair and you are in control of yourself. Let your yes be yes, your no be no. There should never be an idle threat, and your sanction must be reasonable. Think about it. I found that when my children were little, I only had to be really strict with them on a couple of times over something. They soon got the message because they learnt that they didn't like the consequence. And because if they pushed me to the point of needing a sanction, they knew it would happen. What that sanction is very dependent on what you think will impact your child. I'm not going to suggest anything. I found that if I sent them to another room or upstairs to their bedroom, it was a chance for them to calm down. It was a safe place. They actually had all their toys there anyway. It gave them a bit of time out from you, and actually you from them. And it gave you time just to regroup, calm down. And then in a few minutes, maximum of 10, I would go up or go across to see them, and then we'd talk, calm down, and mutually agree to carry on the day. It was an opportunity to say sorry. I see a lot of parenting in the job that I do, and this one really gets me. Don't constantly tell your children off. They will just ignore you. Your discipline will be totally ineffective. Deal with the problem, nip it in the bud, forgive them and move on. Don't bear a grudge against them. Remember that you are the parent here. You're the adult. If you find that you have a day where actually you're sinking with the whole thing, and it does happen, go round to a friend's house, go down to the park, or hand them over to somebody while you take some time out and just regroup yourself. When you're going through a difficult phase, and there will be many, make a point of catching your child doing something good. They might not listen to your praise, but they will internalise it, appreciate it, especially if you're consistent at doing that. Children need boundaries, and if you don't put the time in early, forming that relationship, that safe relationship, you will have to put an awful lot more time in later on when they're older. Because, of course, this all changes when they're teenager, and at this point you need to be wise to choose your battles and how to tackle them. I think at this point you should show them how their behaviour is affecting you and how it makes you feel. You need to find out, listen to them. They probably think that you don't know the half of what they're dealing with. So you need to take some time out, listen, sit down with them. Don't get angry at this stage and set sanctions. Find the gold in your teenager. They will be awesome at doing something, I guarantee it. Observe it, look for it, praise it, build on it, and the rest will follow. Some battles are vital, and some teenagers feel that we're always on the back, and if we fight every battle, we never discover the ones that really do matter. Some are absolutely vital, though, and you must be willing to be unpopular, and you must be willing to cope with the resulting mood that happens. But if you enforce your boundaries and you show that you care, that you feel and know that you're right about the decision and the situation, stand firm. No one said that parenting was easy. Just very quickly, just last three things I'll do really quickly. Respect. Establishing a child-adult relationship by thoughtful discipline and care will teach a child to respect what you say and your decisions, but it will also teach them to have respect for others, for their teachers, for people with different opinions to their own. They will be able to manage their own emotions, and even as small children, we need to show respect to them, their choice of something, their ability to do something, or their view about something. Philippa Perry, who's an author and psychotherapist, says, respect the adults that they have become. It's not about telling them what to do anymore, if indeed it ever was, and you certainly can't change them now. Because at this point, we need to have an adult relationship with our young people. And I'm not sure I can put an age on that, but there is a change. And at this point, as they respect you and you respect them, they begin to have an influence over you. And you begin to hang on their every word and their wisdom. And Steve and I have learnt so much from our children, and we honour their support and their inspiration and their enthusiasm. And there's many things I could say on that, but there's not time this morning. Opportunities. Give your child every opportunity that you can. It builds their confidence and it teaches them independence. We have such good schools here, and with so many opportunities for sport, for trips, for competitions. We've always tried to encourage our children to embrace every opportunity that they're offered. Young people want to be with other young people, and I think if you live in Cockermouth, it's great for them to meet Christian young people from other parts of the country. So encourage them to go on a summer youth camp. Encourage them to go to New Day. What an awesome blessing New Day has been to our family. Because here, young people learn to worship together. They hear about God together with thousands of other like-minded young people, and they love it. Our children have been so blessed by this week. I encourage you to embrace that opportunity. So what do you do when your children come to you and ask if they can go to a family or a church in Mexico? Or what do you do when they want to go off to Bethel School of Ministry and have got the provision to do so? Well, we let them go, and we make everything happen to put in place to allow them to go, because we've built for this moment all through their lives by giving them, releasing them in freedom to have the confidence. And then when they want to do something like that, let them go, because they're just going to learn more about themselves, about life, about God, which is so exciting. But as Steve said, final one, let's enjoy our children. In September, the Guardian newspaper wrote an article called "Put Your Phone Away and Be in the Moment," which started, could we go down in history as the generation that forgot to enjoy their kids? It's a shocking indictment, but the evidence is mounting. Recent research found parents became happier when their children have left home. We're just at that stage now. But children are our delight. It's important to laugh together and not take things seriously. We have family sayings, as Steve was saying, that, we've only got to look in each other's eye and we're all collapsing, laughing. You will have hilarious stories. Embrace every opportunity that having children will bring. It will bring you great joy. Just to finish, I just want to share a picture with you that I had. At the beginning of the summer, Steve and Daniel used a turfer to pull out a very old hawthorn hedge at the bottom of our garden. They pulled it out by the roots, it's quite a long hedge, and we cleared all the growth away. And it was my job to tidy up the ground that was cleared. When I started, I found that in fact this ground wasn't free as I imagined it would be, without all those big roots, loads and loads of wood. It was in fact absolutely compact with rocks, boulders, stones, roots, nettle roots, couch grass weeds, and I needed to use a sledgehammer even just to begin to break up the ground. And while I worked, I felt that God was saying that this complicated ground was a picture of our lives and our relationships with it. Nothing in life is ever straightforward, is it? It's always entwined. Relationships particularly are always entwined. And I prayed, I said, well, that's a great picture, a great thought. When should I bring that? And a few weeks later he said he wanted me to share it with you this morning. Our lives are complex, with different generations, different needs, deeper hurts, boulders of misunderstandings within our families, and not so deep irritations all the time. God wants you to know this morning that He is the master gardener. He will provide the tools that you need to start working that ground, and the heavenly table that Graham mentioned earlier. All the things that you need to start working that ground and breaking up those tensions are available to you. You need to bring those complications before Him, and He promises to regenerate, to renew, and to plant afresh for you and with your family, because of his deep, deep love and care for each one of you. That's it. Thank you.
There's a lot there, isn't there? There's loads. But I think, I want to finish where I started, and that last point that Christine brought, and this isn't just parenting, this is in all our relationships. Me to you, you to each other, you to the people that surround you, in your families, with your kids. God's way is a new covenant way. It's a heart-to-heart connection that we have with him. And that is such a privilege for you people, for me, to know God and have a heart-to-heart connection with him. And it's actually that God has blessed on our church. And it's that he basically wants us to work on. All of this stuff that Christine's been talking about is basically about developing a heart-to-heart connection with another human being, another person. Might be your son, your daughter, but it might be a friend, might be a parent, might be just someone at work, a partner. But it's really, that's the message. And part of that, and a big part of that, is to spend time and have fun together. Have fun. If you remember nothing else, remember that. I'm just going to pray. Father, we just love you for dying for us and bringing that new covenant relationship, one in which we can know you. Father, just would you strengthen that by your Holy Spirit? Would you just knit us to yourself? Would you just develop that heart-to-heart connection so that then we in turn can be your people, your sons and daughters to the people that are around us, to our children, and to our friends. Lord, would you just unlock more of that, more of you, more heart-to-heart connection among your people. Amen.